Hi, this is Dan here. I've got 7 slap bass exercises for you. We're going to go through them, introducing different techniques as we go. Let's take a look at this first one. I'm using the thumb here, which is notated with an S, and also some muting. With the drum beat, this is how it goes. Let's talk quickly about the thumb. There are different angles that people use and different places to slap. So really the conclusion I have is to find your own way. You know, you see people slap a bit like this, a bit more thumb up. Mark King does that, or a bit more parallel to the strings, which is what Marcus Miller does. That's the kind of way I like to do it. And there are, broadly speaking, 2 ways of doing this. One is slapping and then kind of bouncing off the string, and the other is to slap and come through the string. Like that. I'll give you a bit of a closer up view of this. This is the bounce. Very much in the wrist. You hit the string and you bounce off. If you didn't, you would just get no sound really. The string wouldn't vibrate. So that's the bounce version. And then coming through that string, you get a really good fat tone with that. If I was doing something like that, it's bouncing all the way for me. And that's how I tend to play most of the time. But as I'll show you, there are other ways of doing it. Right, the next bit is muting. This is crucial because sometimes when you're playing fingerstyle, this hand can be involved in stopping strings ringing. But when you're slapping, largely it's out of the equation. You can use fingers, especially if you use that bounce technique. You can be quite close to the strings and mute them. But I tend to do a lot of muting with this hand. So here we go. We're just going slap and then muting the strings with, I'm using all fingers just to avoid any, you know, any ringing out or harmonics. So. I'm laying a first finger across the 3 strings here, the A, D, and G, just to really deaden everything. And I don't want this. That is a legitimate slap bass technique. But I don't want that here. I want to be quite gentle with the muting. And that requires a certain touch that you need to get used to. So that's that one. The next exercise, almost exactly the same, but we're going to introduce a ghost note. That's that little cross on the 2nd and 4th beats. So we're doing the same thing where we've got a slap, and then we got this. So when you mute, keep your fingers pressed down on the strings very gently. That's now muted. And then you have another slap. Again, I'm doing the bounce technique. And that is a difficult one to get. It took me ages to get this when I was learning slap. You come down and you sort of bounce a tiny bit off. It's not a big motion. As with a lot of technique on bass, I think aiming for economy of motion is a good thing, so you're not doing too many movements. Of course, Lewis Johnson did, you know, he was coming up from up here, but that's hard to get accurate, and that looked great, looked very showy, and I think that's half the reason he used it. But of course, there was a big attack with that too. A lot of this stuff can be variable, find your own way. Ghost notes in slap playing sounds really good. So you could just get an E string and make up some rhythms like that. A lot of slap bass playing is to do with the interplay between the 2 hands, and I introduced a little bit of hammer-ons and things like that. By the way, I'm probably going to do a few more lessons on slap in order to dive a little bit more deeply into some of these things I'm talking about, which I'm perhaps not touching on in this lesson. So do subscribe, and by the way, give the video a like if you get something from it. Next one. With the drums. quick note, that's at 120 beats per minute. And if this is the first time you're slapping, or you're coming back to slap, or you just want to get it incorporated into your playing a bit more, I wouldn't go straight from that into a drum beat or a metronome, and I certainly wouldn't go into that sort of speed. Start at a much slower tempo, but even before that, just get the technique together. So here we go. That's the same as the previous exercise. But here we've got the pop. Okay, so that's notated by a P, and on the 5th fret to the 7th fret of the A string, we're going D to E with a hammer-on. Now, just a quick word here, muting again. There are so many ways of doing this, but here I'm just touching the underside of the E string with the tip of my first finger and backing that first finger down onto the D and the G, so that everything is now muted, or rather the D, G and E strings are muted. And just that string there, the A, I can play that. So when I come down for the first slap, I'm doing that bouncing thing, and I'm just getting that index finger, that's the one I'm going to pop or pull with. As I come down for the slap, it's already under the string to come up for the pop or the pull, okay? So you could just mute the strings, get used to this by doing this. So go E string and then slap, and then A string, pop. Now, if you're coming down like this, you can still do it, but it's a bit more difficult. The up thumb method, or the parallel thumb method, I think anyway, gets that popping finger in there a bit easier. But that's my opinion. You might disagree. You might be able to do it your own way. But that's a good skill, either on adjacent strings, or even strings to skip, so like E and D. That's a very common technique, and even on the same string. That's a good technique to get down. So again. If your accuracy is all over the place, don't worry, that's completely normal. You can just get the thumb going on the E string, then the A. Now, when I come to the D, by the way, and the G, or also the A, I tend to do the coming through. I think it fattens up the tone. You lose a little bit, I feel anyway. So I tend to do that less of a bounce and more of a through the string there. So it's all about getting accuracy together. Practicing muting as well. So you can do your own little exercises as well. Let's move on to the next one. So we've got the low E again, and then we've got E 7th fret A string, and just the octave above that, which is on the 9th fret of the G string. So very slowly. We've got ghost notes and popped notes. So this is just, bass playing is very much a lot about this, where you're just refining your touch and your coordination. Especially funky type stuff like this, where sometimes you're pressing in to get a note, and sometimes you're releasing the touch to get a ghost note. All these little intricate movements, it requires muscle memory, which you will get with practice, obviously. And that especially is a bit awkward, where you're going ghost, pop, and those 8th notes, I'm just making them slightly longer. That dot above the note there is staccato. That means very short. And notice how rhythmic everything, how rigid it is. I'm going to, I'm just going sort of down, almost like a pick or plectrum player would be going down, up. And it's like a machine. I'm sort of thinking that when I'm slapping. I've got my little finger resting here on the body. It's just something I do. Some players do that too, just to keep everything a bit steady and a bit accurate. to keep everything uniform. You know, you could just close up your hand, that's the other way. My wrist is also resting here. So that keeps everything a bit more uniform, because it can get a bit, you know, random, but I don't want that. I want everything to be the same every time I play. So that's what I do. You can, of course, experiment. Again, I've got the first finger doing quite a lot of muting here. Tip of it touching the underside of the E, backing onto the D and the G. Obviously, when I'm playing the E, I need that to be clear, so I move off. Then I'm using first finger for the low E, well, E on the 7th fret, little finger for the E on the 9th fret of the G string. I've just got that set in its own shape. And this longer second finger and third finger are just closing down when I need to mute the strings. But I don't want this. You hear that? That's a harmonic on the fret 7. So that's why you've just got to pay a little bit of attention with muting. It can be boring having to do that, but you have to. See, that's good. I can't hear anything. And it's just drilling it over and over again. Let's do the next one. Okay, this is quite a common thing as well, the right hand, in my case, the slapping hand, doing a lot of rhythmic work, okay? A lot of slap involves, like I said before, the interplay between the hands, like this. Okay, a lot of the rhythm came from this hand, but in this exercise, you got that kind of thing. Again, I'm muting here. And there I was just going thumb, thumb, pop on the A and the G strings. That was another thing that really was tricky for me when I was learning. It's the whole 2 thumbs in a row thing. Especially with that bounce. Now, if you do the going through the string, I don't know, I can't do that. It's just too fast for me. That's why the bounce works for me, especially with things like this, where you're using like a few thumbs in a row. Okay, that's why I do the bounce there. So very slowly, this is. Again, octaves on the E's. And we've got 2 ghost notes. Now you will see players, Marcus Miller does this a lot, thumb over the top to aid muting. You can absolutely do that too. You know, technicians will be horrified because the thumb needs to stay behind the neck, but you do what you have to do. You'll see that a lot. You know, that's muting. So do that as well if you need to, or what I told you before, that first finger. I like that way. Next line. Here we've got octaves and moving around a bit. So I'm just moving through notes of a minor pentatonic scale, and after this exercise I'll just show you a few ways you can use that. So octaves on 7th to 9th fret. And now we're going down to a D, and this is shifting here. Because it's octaves, I'm setting my hand in one shape, which can just play all the octaves. So some people use 3rd finger for octaves. I like to use 4th because it lessens the bend in the wrist. Okay, so I'm going like this. And I definitely am doing that because I'm on the A string here. I want to mute the E string. I'm doing that with the tip of that first finger again. Now you have a tiny rest to get from the 5th fret all the way up to the 10th fret, the G. And then we've got to slide into the 12th fret, into the A. I'm I'm choosing to play everything on the A string, so on the repeat I would have to go. And you should practice shifts like that. That's a big one. That's going from the 12th fret all the way down to the 7th fret. You should be able to do something like that, even though it is hard. But you could, of course, go down to the 12th fret. I just find there's just more string to play on the A and the G there. I prefer to do that. Okay, on the last two lines we've got a bit more of a bass line. So here we've got hammer-ons, which sound great. I was going to show you the pentatonic. I'll do it with this one as well. Okay, but let me play it first. Okay, let's go through that slowly. First bar. There we've got hammer-ons. Exactly the same thing as before, accuracy when changing different strings. That's just something to do slowly. So frets 5 to 7. Then you've got a pop. So 2 slaps. And it's that thing again. As I come down, just before the pop, the finger is already underneath the string to come up. Now that thing of playing hammer-ons and, you know, with either a thumb or a pop, that happens loads. Now here, frets 5 to 7 on the E, A and D are notes that you find in an E minor pentatonic scale. So anywhere where you can find notes that are like 2 frets apart or a whole step, like frets 7 to 9 on the G and the D, and then frets 5 to 7 on the D, A and E. Whenever you find that, you've got ample opportunity to practice this. Also frets 3 to 5. Hammer-ons all the way here. You can do pull-offs as well. That's a nice way to just improvise. And I'm just introducing hammer-ons and vibrato. And it just sounds really good. So those are excellent notes just to practice your own thing with all these different techniques. So first bar. Then we've got thumb all the way. And that's vibrato, those wavy lines. So I'm sliding into that B flat, but it's really a grace note, sort of mini hammer-on, frets 5 to 6. Next bar, slowly again. It's that thing of going up, down all the time. And then 2 pulls here. So I'm sliding out to fret 9, the E, from about 2 frets lower. Back again with the 3rd finger. And then I am absolutely definitely doing that slapping through the string, coming to rest here. If I don't do that, on the D string especially, the way I play on this bass, it just sounds a bit weak. I can get a bit more force if I go through. Because the previous line was also made up from a minor pentatonic scale, just going across a string. It's a really good thing to do. Get your minor pentatonic down and play octaves through it. You really can make up slap bass riffs very easily with a minor pentatonic scale. You know, I'm just using those shapes. They just sound really good all the time. So I hope that lesson helps. Do subscribe to this channel and hit the notification button, because I've shied away from slap bass lessons. I don't know why. I love the technique, but I will be doing a few more. I'll dive a bit deeper into the techniques. I'll show you some of the tricks that these other players are doing. I think that's probably next lesson. You know, a few more Marcus Miller, Mark King tricks that they do. It all incorporates everything I've shown you. Don't worry, it's a bit difficult. Start slow. You know, have a game plan, practice a little bit every day, and you'll find after a week it feels a bit better, and keep at it and you'll get it in no time. If you do have any questions, do leave a comment below. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.